you grew up in the 2000s and ever visited a restaurant like McDonald's, you probably spent some time in the kids' play area. These areas would often have things like jungle gyms or ball pits, but if you were lucky, there might be something like a PlayStation setup. If you didn't have a PlayStation of your own, this would be the highlight of the play area, letting you play video games for however long you wanted, or until your parents told you it was time to go home. When I was a kid, it always seemed like the games available were adaptations of whatever animated movies had come out recently, games like Madagascar or Kung Fu Panda, or in my case, the B movie. Now, unless you decided to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the same restaurant, you wouldn't get to play the complete game. So I thought I would play the B movie game again in its fullest to see just what I was missing out on. The game tells the same story as the movie, except it's told through flashbacks as Barry is being interviewed on the B equivalent of The Tonight Show, complete with an obnoxious host and cringy jokes.
You know, you're shorter in person than you look on TV.
I'm told the camera adds 5mm.
Retelling the story this way is an interesting method, since it means that between every story chapter, you can explore the hive. During this free play section, you get to roam around in a GTA-style manner, either on foot or in a vehicle. I promise that is the only B pun I'm going to make in this video. You can either take your own car or you can hijack other cars, just like GTA, although instead of hijacking, it's more of a just getting a lift from a fellow bee. Unfortunately, you cannot commit acts of murder by driving over other bees. Trust me, I tried. But you can travel between the different areas of the hive, such as Hunix, the Wax Museum, which houses collectibles found during store missions, or spending your hard-earned honey on things like new outfits or even cars to pimp out your ride and assert dominance over the other bees. Now, how exactly do you acquire this honey? Well, much like the busy life of a bee, getting a chance to explore the hive is also met with your obligations of working for the queen, which in the B movie means performing a bunch of mini-games that are essentially knockoffs of real games. You've got the races, which are totally not Mario Kart, you've got the taxi services, which are totally not Crazy Taxi, and you can also roleplay as an Uber Eats delivery driver. Or maybe, if that's not what you want, you can decide to become a car physiotherapist in which you massage car pipes in order to fix cars. I wouldn't be surprised if this is what actual car mechanics do. But maybe these minigames seem a bit far-fetched. I mean, why would a bee need to deliver food on a scooter when they could just fly around everywhere? Where's my realism? Well, if that's what you're after, you might be interested in the Hunix section of the hive, responsible for the production of honey. This area has 3 different jobs available for you to do that all involve the production of honey. You've got the honeycomb collection area, which is literally just pachinko. You have the crane operator job to collect the finished honey, and last but not least, the honey drafter in which you fill jars with honey. I hope that out of all the minigames I just mentioned, you found at least one that interests you, because it is actually a requirement to complete a set number of these jobs between each and every story chapter. At the start, this doesn't actually seem that bad, since it lets you go around trying out each of the few minigames. But eventually, the monotonous whirring of the machinery as you perform the same menial tasks over and over, with the only solace knowing that after this you get to spend maybe 10 minutes at best enjoying something different for once in your life, that hit a bit too close to home for me. The repetitiveness is so bad that on multiple occasions I would have one of the sound effects get stuck on a loop, playing even after I finished the minigame. Oh, that was easy. What's better is this is only in the left ear, it sounds like. But I mentioned that after enough minigames are completed, you are rewarded with the enjoyment of a story chapter. I say enjoyment in air quotes because the length of the story chapters vary quite a bit. Story levels consist of a handful of gimmicks strung together. The lengthiest one is where you get to roam around while avoiding falling raindrops using your bee vision to enter the matrix. Sometimes you have to interact with things like buttons or flowers for pollination, which require you to press 2 whole buttons. Yeah, that's right, unlike the minigames, these story segments don't mess around. And let's not forget the ever-present race wars between the bees and the various other species, which are the wasps and the hornets. And of course, we cannot forget the Shadow of the Colossus style gameplay, where you go up against a human by simply flying around them and avoiding their arms flailing around like they're a wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man. But arguably, the most important gameplay aspect of this game is none other than the QuickTime events. And this game truly showed innovative thinking, because if you fail a QuickTime event, the sequence in which the buttons appear are actually randomized each and every attempt you do.
Think of the replay value!
Now, some story chapters include every single aspect of these in their missions, which means you get some good bang for your buck, whereas some only have one of these features. Now, you would think that these shorter chapters would require you to complete less minigames to unlock them since they're so short, and you would actually be absolutely wrong. The game has 11 chapters, starting off with Barry's first expedition outside of the hive, to him meeting Kronk, having a picnic with Vanessa, making the breakthrough discovery of humans selling honey, visiting the bee farms where honey is being extracted, and finding the mastermind of this honey plan, Montgomery. But it's here where the game takes a bit of a creative turn, I guess playing into the fact that this is Barry retelling his story so he can take his chance to sensationalize some stuff. After spying on Montgomery, Barry and Vanessa infiltrate his office where we try to find some evidence to use against Montgomery in court. This is one of my favorite chapters for, well, obvious reasons. It turns out that this is a trap though, as Barry is confronted by the Hornets. After making an escape from these Hornets, the next chapter is suddenly Barry in a 1v1 against Ken in the bathroom. Although, don't think too much about that because immediately after this, the next chapter drops Barry in some secret lab. Here, Barry has to use his secret spy skills to get access to the hidden Spur project. This includes getting a fingerprint, breast scan, and eye scan of 3 different scientists. The fingerprint is pretty easy as it's just using a glove, the breath is done using Barry's pollination gun, and the eye scan, well, if you thought Barry was going to rip out somebody's eyeball, don't worry, I thought the same. But instead, he just draws an eye on his ass instead. But once Barry discovers that Montgomery plans to replace most of the honey with an alternative made from Brussels sprouts, hence the name Spur, it cuts to after the court case where Barry just straight up kills Montgomery. These later chapters are very short compared to the earlier ones, making the game feel a bit rushed, which I guess is understandable considering most of the game's content is probably dedicated to the hive activities. I mean, you don't even get the iconic scene where Barry meets Vanessa, except for in a special extras after scene where you complete the whole game.
How should I start it? You like jazz?
But maybe you don't want to get lost in the endless loop that is performing jobs to do the next story chapter only to go back to the same jobs again. Well, good news, there is another place in the Hive where you can spend your time. That's the arcade, where you can play minigames which, unlike the jobs, are meant for fun and not work. This of course makes them so much better and way different than the actual minigames. You know, thinking back, maybe there's a reason why games like these were chosen for kids' play areas. That hour or so you spent there was just enough to wander around the Hive, trying out each of the minigames before you actually got bored of the game.
You'll stroke that pipe and you'll like it, damn it.
Most kids probably didn't even realize there was an actual story to the game and thought it was just the minigames. If you were with a friend, you could even challenge them to multiplayer races, though that would require you knowing that you would have to exit the game and head to the main menu, which was probably a bit too much to ask for kids in the 2000s. Honestly, the most exciting part of this game was when I started it up and I saw in the main menu that there was a trailer for the Kung Fu Panda game. Everything else after that was just downhill.